It's a video special from the Mossad Files. I'm Dan Raviv. The Mossad Files is a weekly audio podcast focused on the strategic issues facing the Middle East, especially Israel. And lately, as we know, there are many. We try to bring you some interviews in video form when it's a subject and or a person who's especially interesting. And to tell you the truth, not many people, certainly as I talk about the Middle East, remember to talk about Jordan, the country just east of Israel, the country that, well, had the West Bank. Uh, Aaron Magid, you're going to correct me if I get some of this wrong. Welcome, welcome to the Mossad Files. But to me, Jordan had the West Bank from 1948 to 1967 and lost it in the Six-Day War of 1967. I think that's about right. And as I say, welcome to the podcast, Aaron Magid.
Thank you for hosting me.
Well, for sure. And one good reason is that you've written a book, a biography of the monarch of Jordan. The name of the book is The Most American King, Abdullah of Jordan. So you're an expert on King Abdullah. I know you spent a lot of time in Jordan. Let me ask you about something that's been in the news, even with all the crisis going on and Israel stepping up its war in Gaza. On Wednesday, the monarch of Qatar went on a foreign visit, which is a little bit rare for him. And Sheikh Tamim Al Thani visited Amman, Jordan. He visited King Abdullah. Now, that said to me that with everything going on, King Abdullah is definitely a player. So comment, what might that have been about at this juncture?
Sure. So King Abdullah strongly opposed the Israeli strike against Hamas officials in Qatar. And one of the reasons the Qatari emir probably visited Amman was to show appreciation for the strong Jordanian condemnation. King Abdullah actually was recently in Doha for the Arab Summit. And he supported Qatar. So even though Qatar and Jordan have had differences over the year, including on the role of the Muslim Brotherhood on this issue regarding Israeli strikes in Doha, there's complete alignment between Amman and Qatar.
Well, let me dig into that a little bit because indeed Qatar's reputation includes at least tolerance for radical or extremist factions, like, as you say, the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas, of course, has had its political leadership in Qatar, but at the same time, Qatar plays host to a large American base. Now, go ahead, give me some contrasts with Jordan, which is thought of as a very pro-American country, population a little over 11 million. Keep in mind, Israel's about 10 million. As I said, just east of Jordan, kind of between, as I said, just east of Israel, kind of between Israel and Iraq. I'm even thinking about your book title, right? I mean, The Most American King. Jordan's firmly in America's orbit. True?
So especially King Abdullah is the leader. There are certainly differences between the Jordanian public and U.S. policy in the region, and there's a lot of criticism right now over the U.S. stance in terms of the war in Gaza. But King Abdullah, both from a personal level and politically, is strongly aligned with the United States. So we'll start personally. He attended middle school and high school in Massachusetts. He went to Deerfield Academy. He was on the wrestling team, and he went by the name Ab. Because he wanted to fit in like other Americans. When his father wanted him to go to Arabic lessons, he would actually hide in the closet because he wanted to be just like one of the other guys. Afterwards, he attended Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and he so much enjoyed the experience, he ended up sending his own children to the prestigious Jesuit university. He trained with the U.S. military in Kentucky. And he was partying and drinking with his U.S. military hosts. In fact, he spent so much time in the West when he became king in 1999, he actually spoke better English than Arabic. And even to this day, he has luxury properties both in Washington, D.C. and Georgetown, but also in California. He was even on a Star Trek episode as well in California. And he went on his honeymoon in New York, Hawaii, and Washington. So the personal ties are quite strong, but it's not just personal, it's also political. So King Abdullah was the first Arab leader to meet in the White House with President Trump, President Biden, and President Obama. There are thousands of U.S. troops who are stationed in the Hashemite Kingdom, both under Democratic and Republican administrations. The CIA ties with the Jordan's intelligence apparatus are quite strong. And after 9/11, the CIA sent non-Jordanian prisoners to the Hashemite Kingdom because they knew they could interrogate them more freely before sending them to Guantanamo Bay. In recent years, Jordan has received about $1.5 billion in aid from the United States. So, as I mentioned, under King Abdullah, the relationship is quite strong.
Now, about that foreign aid, is Jordan a very needy country? I recall that Jordan was housing, would it be over 1 million Syrians during the long Syrian civil war? That would be in northern Jordan. Is that still a challenge?
So Jordan, as you mentioned, does still host hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees from the originally the 2011 civil war. Some of them have returned to Syria, but many still remain. But Jordan has had economic woes far before the 2011 crisis. So right now, the unemployment rate is over 20%. To put into perspective, during the Great Depression in the United States, the unemployment rate was 25%. So Jordan's had almost Great Depression unemployment challenges for many years now. And so they're very reliant on the United States for financial support. And then they, of course, they provide the United States with a lot in return. Most notably for your listeners, in 2024 and 2025, Jordan shot down Iranian missiles that were fired from Iran towards Israel. And they allowed U.S. troops who were stationed in Jordan to also join and shoot down those missiles.
I recall, and indeed, it was never quite, I don't think it was confirmed by Jordan's government, but as a journalist who knows Jordan very well, you're confident this is true. In April and October of last year, Iran fired missiles and drones at Israel. It seemed to me that the US and Britain, especially, France was involved too, organized a coalition. And without announcing it, apparently Jordan's government took part in shooting down both missiles and drones. You're confident about that?
Correct. So this was somewhat of a controversial move given the hostility many Jordanians feel towards Israel, especially as the Gaza death toll has risen. But Jordan framed it not as saving Israeli lives, but more to protect the country's sovereignty and not allowing Iran to abuse its country's airspace.
I see. Jordan's airspace wasn't cleared for that, as you say. Well, here's the big question. I mean, Abdullah has been king since 1999. I don't know whether his policy toward the Palestinians, and in your answer, maybe remind us. I seem to recall that a huge number of the 11.5 million people of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan consider themselves Palestinians, and I don't know if that means that they're from the West Bank. But in other words, has Abdullah changed what his father, King Hussein, did? Hussein died in 1999, cancer. He was only 63 years old. Here's an irony. King Abdullah, your subject, is 63 right now. I had the privilege in 1994 of being present for the Israeli Jordanian peace treaty signing in the desert between the two countries. Everyone took that as a happy occasion. That war would be over, and that has stuck. Is there some way, especially on the Palestinian issue, that King Abdullah has been somewhat different from his father?
So there has definitely been a change that King Abdullah has had towards Israel during his rule. So to answer your first question, about 50% of Jordanians are of Palestinian origin, though the government doesn't confirm the exact amount because it's controversial. You might remember in 1970, Jordan actually had a civil war between King Hussein and his security forces and Palestinian militants with Yasser Arafat. Thousands of people were killed in that war, and eventually the Palestinian militants fled the country. So the topic is quite controversial even to this day.
And by the way, is it your understanding that Jordanians who consider themselves Palestinians or descended from Palestinians, do they mean the West Bank? Because there was a period in which Britain got all of that land from the Ottoman Empire of Turkey at the end of World War I, and that included what is now Israel, West Bank, Gaza, and Jordan. So, what does Palestinian mean, apparently, to folks who say that?
So many of them are from the West Bank because, as you noted, Jordan controlled the West Bank from after the 1948 war until 1967. Some are from what is present-day Israel, and they would consider Palestine. So these are territories within 1948 borders. And then there are some Jordanians, not a huge number, but there are some who are also from Gaza as well.
Oh, I get the point here. You're saying there are quite a few who consider themselves refugees. They probably would say that the Jewish armies or Israel kicked them out in 48 and then in 67 from the West Bank. So you get people who consider themselves refugees. All right. Now I promise not to interrupt you. Has Abdullah been different on that issue than his father, King Hussein?
Sure. So King Abdullah in 1999, he changed Jordan's policy towards Hamas. King Hussein had allowed senior Hamas operatives to remain in the country even after the peace deal was signed. because he thought it was important to boost his legitimacy among Jordanian public opinion. King Abdullah, when he came into power, he decided that he didn't want to have feet in both of those playing fields, and he decided to expel the Hamas leaders from Jordan. This was controversial at the time, especially because he was trying to legitimize his rule, but he accused the Hamas operatives of engaging in terrorism, and he didn't want that in his country's territory. So there was actually a honeymoon phase of King Abdullah's policy towards Israel, and part of it was because of his expulsion of the Hamas operatives in 1999, but it wasn't just that. He said in a 1999 interview he had many friends in the Israeli military, comments that you'd never hear from King Abdullah, certainly in the present day. He said Israel had gained more legitimacy from its withdrawal from Lebanon in 2000. Again, comments you would highly unlikely to hear from a Jordanian leader praising Israel's morals in today's day and age. And he said it was even possible that one of his children might marry an Israeli, something, of course, that never happened. So King Abdullah spoke very fondly of Israel. He met with Prime Minister Ehud Barak during his early years on the throne. But then we see a shift in his policies towards Israel, starting with the Second Intifada and the high Palestinian death toll. And then the ties continued to deteriorate when Prime Minister Netanyahu returned to power in 2009. We had a series of incidents that caused outrage in Jordan. We had an Israeli security guard kill two Jordanians in Amman. Many Jordanians were upset by that, especially when Prime Minister Netanyahu warmly embraced the shooter. That was quite controversial. There were incidents at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, and Jordan has a special relationship with the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and that infuriated many Jordanians. And then Crown Prince Hussein, King Abdullah's son, was set to visit Jerusalem and see the mosque, but there was some sort of disagreement with Israeli security forces, and that visit was canceled. So there's a lot of bad blood between King Abdullah and Prime Minister Netanyahu, though at the same time, I should emphasize the security ties between Israel and Jordan have remained strong. One example would be Jordan shooting down the Iranian missiles. But another would be that there was an Axios report last year that Jordan security officials were actually mediating between Israel and the new authorities in Syria because Jordan has strong relations with both parties. So their political tensions are quite strong, but the security ties have remained ongoing.
Well, thinking about the security ties, Yossi Cohen was head of the Mossad until 4 years ago, and he has a memoir out, a new book, and among other things, it says that he was in charge of all connections with King Abdullah and the Jordanian government, mainly because they did not want to meet or talk to Netanyahu. But I think also, would you agree, Aaron, because one of the key elements of the peaceful relationship between Jordan and Israel is security and intelligence cooperation?
Exactly. So for the book, I actually spoke with the former Mossad director, Tamir Pardo, and he spoke extremely favorably about King Abdullah. He said that the ties were excellent when he was Mossad director, and this is in the mid 2010s. There was great cooperation in the fight in terrorism, and he also met repeatedly with King Abdullah, which shows that even though King Abdullah has often been frustrated with the Israeli prime minister, he understands that security cooperation is key both for Jordan, for Israel, and for Jordan's relationship with the United States. So he maintains that.
What do you think is the international reputation of Jordan's intelligence services? There's a word that travelers in the Middle East often know, the mukhabarat, which people think of as the secret police that might oppress people and be inquisitive toward their own citizens. But there is the international intelligence side of that, in which a country can cooperate with the CIA and the British MI6 and the Mossad. So what's the reputation of the Jordanians?
So the Jordanian Intelligence Services, also known as the GID, really has an excellent reputation. There's some commentators, there was an Atlantic article that said they're even the most sophisticated Arab intelligence service across the Middle East. So there's really excellent cooperation both with the United States and with Israel. And we can see the success of Jordan's GID by the terror that happens across the region. We saw it with ISIS, the numerous attacks in Syria, and where they even took over territory in Syria and in Iraq. We saw ISIS's prominence in Egypt, and ISIS was unable to carry out a single large-scale attack in Jordan. When I say large-scale attack, killing like 50, 100 people, not a single time that happened. The major credit to that is Jordan's security forces.
Sure, because ISIS would have tried. They like to destabilize a government such as King Abdullah's. What do you think King Abdullah wants for the future of the West Bank and Jerusalem and Gaza? Is he clear on that?
Sure. So King Abdullah has been quite clear in the past few years. He wants an independent Palestinian state with both East Bank, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. He's not a supporter of Hamas at all. In fact, there were reports in the beginning of the October 2023 war that he wanted Israel to finish off Hamas once and for all. But at the same time, he became increasingly disillusioned with the Netanyahu government and its prosecution of the war. So he wants a Palestinian state. He's much more aligned with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and with the Fatah movement. He's more in touch with kind of secular nationalists, not Islamists. But at the same time, it does not seem likely that that's going to occur.
Let me guess that there's not complete trust between Mahmoud Abbas, the current leader of the Fatah faction, the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah in the West Bank. There's not complete trust between him and King Abdullah, if only because of what Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian movement did, what you described as a civil war, the attempt to overthrow King Hussein. But I guess for many reasons, right? There are those, Aaron, I don't know what you think about this, who think that if a Palestinian state were formed now and there were fair elections, like who knows when that might occur, in both the West Bank and Gaza, Hamas might win and pro-Western governments and leaders like King Abdullah would regret it.
So there are certainly commentators who say that Hamas would do favorably, especially in the West Bank. But I would emphasize it's extremely unlikely we're going to have any of these elections in the time being. And King Abdullah's top priority right now is just ending the Gaza war because there have been a lot of protests inside Jordan calling for King Abdullah to cancel the peace treaty with Israel, to freeze the multi-billion-dollar gas accord, things that are quite controversial in the Hashemite kingdom. And he's refused to do it, even though there's a lot of domestic pressure. And he thinks that if they can end the war, that's going to cause the protests to decline, and there'll be less pressure on him, along with his son, Crown Prince Hussein, who he's grooming to take over.
Oh, every reason to want the Gaza war to end. I mean, everyone's got all sorts of reasons, but now I'm seeing King Abdullah's more clearly. Aaron, what happened with the sense of promise when there was the Israeli-Jordanian peace treaty, that signing in 1994, the sense of promise that economically, for ecology, for the minerals of the Dead Sea, I mean, science, in so many ways, Jordan would benefit and cooperation would be great. Does that exist?
So the amount of economic cooperation is relatively limited. The ties are stronger on the security side, along with energy. But in terms of Jordanian tourists to Israel or Israeli high tech in Amman or Irbid, that's not very significant. From the Jordanian perspective, they thought that when they were signing the 1994 peace treaty with Israel, it was going to be a very close period before a comprehensive Israeli-Palestinian agreement and a Palestinian state was going to be reached. And then it would have been more politically popular for Jordanian businesses to cooperate with Israelis openly. Of course, that didn't happen. And therefore, Israel is viewed in a much more controversial lens today, especially with the high Palestinian death toll in Gaza.
Well, what's likely to happen in the next couple of years? You're somewhat optimistic about Israeli-Jordanian relations if the Gaza war can end. Especially, would you agree, if a lot of Arab countries, maybe the ones far wealthier than Jordan, take part in rebuilding Gaza, and then King Abdullah probably would want to have a role. I know recently he had his Air Force drop aid packages from the air onto Gaza.
Yeah, so Jordan has been a leader in terms of the humanitarian aid into Gaza. It's not just been in terms of the airdrops. They've also been sending trucks across the land route from the Al-Anbi border through the West Bank into the Gaza Strip. So they've tried to play a key role, but it's very difficult long term for the Jordanian government to justify its relationship with Israel when the death toll is so high. So they're certainly hoping for the war to end and then the pressure to decline. And it's not just the protests that they're upset about. It's also they don't appreciate every time Iran fires missiles across their country into Israel. That's happened 3 times in the past 18 months. And these kind of events are more and more likely when the Gaza war is ongoing. And then finally, there was an incident last year where pro-Iran militias fired into northern Jordan and killed 3 U.S. soldiers. So these kinds of incidents, often connected to Gaza in one way or another, are deeply embarrassing for the country, and they're just challenging for the country's long-term leadership. So they think if we end the war in Gaza, not that anyone think that there's going to be a Palestinian state anytime in the short-term future, but if we just end the war in Gaza, that'll reduce the tensions.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron Magid. You are the author of a new biography. It's called The Most American King, Abdullah of Jordan. I think we've all learned a lot. Aaron Magid, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan. I really appreciate it.
I'm confident that you've just heard more than you usually do about the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. As you heard from Aaron Magid, that country can be a key player, especially if and when the Gaza war ends. Please keep in mind, tell your friends, the Mossad Files weekly audio podcast. You can find it on all the major audio sites. And among my books, the most recent is, there it is, Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. I wrote it with Yossi Melton. Thank you very much. I'm Dan Levine.